Stereotypical definitions of the real rape. In addition to legal definitions of sexual aggression and definitions for the purposes of surveys and research studies, there is a third and highly relevant context in which the meaning of sexual aggression is defined. This is the context of everyday discourse, reflecting people's intuitive understanding of sexual aggression, most notably rape. A large research literature has shown that the everyday definition of sexual aggression is strongly committed to the real rape stereotype. This stereotype is a generalized cognitive schema which states that in order to qualify as a real rape, a situation has to meet a number of specific criteria. A surprise attack in a dark or isolated place involving the use of physical force, carried out by a stranger on an unsuspecting victim who shows strong physical resistance. The more of these criteria are missing in a specific incident, the less likely people are to consider it a case of real rape. Moreover, the real rape stereotype contains beliefs about the reactions of a real victim after the incident, who is expected to show clear signs of distress and agitation. Real rape stereotype. Generalized cognitive schema that a real rape is a surprise attack in a dark or isolated place involving the use of physical force carried out by a stranger on an unsuspecting victim who shows strong physical resistance. Systematic analyses of rape experiences reported in victimization surveys clearly show that the real rape stereotype is indeed a stereotype in terms of it being an inaccurate overgeneralization. A consistent finding is that the majority of sexual assault victims know their perpetrators as current or former partners, friends, or colleagues and acquaintances. For example, in a representative survey from Germany, only 7.1% of sexual assault experiences involved a perpetrator who was a stranger to the victim. Data from the crime survey in England and Wales showed that in 63% of the reported cases of sexual assault experienced since age 16, the perpetrator was a partner, ex-partner, or family member. The same survey also revealed that well over half of all reported incidents took place at either the victim's or the aggressor's home. Because many victims know and trust the person attacking them, many assaults come unexpectedly and may explain why there is often no physical struggle. Moreover, victims often freeze with fear and are therefore unable to put up physical resistance. Despite its disconfirmation by empirical data on the most common circumstances of sexual assault, the real rape stereotype influences the way society deals with rape victims in several critical ways. A consistent finding is the attribution of blame to victims, especially in cases that do not match the stereotype, for example, because the attacker was a person known to the victim, or the victim did not immediately report the incident to the police. A comment designed to demonstrate the impact of the real rape stereotype is the mock jury paradigm, in which participants are presented with descriptions of sexual assault incidents and asked to evaluate the perpetrator and the victim. This paradigm enables researchers to manipulate critical information, such as victim or perpetrator behavior, while holding other aspects of the situation constant. In a recent study using this paradigm, Stewart et al. 2019 varied the prototypicality of the victim, presenting her as either emotional and upset or calm and controlled when talking about the incident, the prototypicality of the assault, presenting it as either a stranger or an acquaintance rape, and the prototypicality of the perpetrator, presenting him as either being socially awkward and becoming angry and unsympathetic during questioning, or as showing the opposite behavior. They found that the victim was perceived more negatively in the non-prototypical victim and assault condition, whereas perpetrator prototypicality did not affect participants' judgments. Legal definitions apply equally to both stranger and acquaintance rape and do not refer to victim behavior at all, so information about the victim's emotional response to the assault and relationship to the perpetrator should not play a role in evaluating a sexual assault charge. However, such negative reactions to victims of sexual assault are common, and there is evidence that they are specific to rape as compared with other violent crimes. Moreover, they proportionately reduce the responsibility attributed to the perpetrator. These social reactions are often experienced as a second assault by victims of rape. An analysis of data extracted from Twitter shows that tweets about sexual assault that contained victim-blaming statements were retweeted more often than tweets that contained statements supportive of victims of sexual violence. As shown by Campbell et al. 1999, victims of non-stranger rape, whose experience fell outside the real rape stereotype, were particularly likely to encounter victim-blaming responses from legal or medical professionals and had significantly higher levels of PTSD. The real rape stereotype has a major impact on the documentation of the prevalence of sexual assault on the basis of surveys and crime statistics. As noted above, the reporting rate for sexual assault is low, both in absolute terms and in comparison with other violent crimes. One reason is that victims of rape may also have internalized the real rape stereotype and therefore do not classify an unwanted sexual experience as a sexual assault if it deviates from the stereotype. This group is called unacknowledged rape victims based on their endorsement of the experience of rape described in behavioral terms. See, for instance, the items of the sexual experiences survey by Koss et al. 2007 shown in Chapter 1, but say no to the question, "Have you ever been raped?" A meta-analysis by Wilson and Miller 2016 found that the rate of unacknowledged victims was 60% across their 28 studies. These victims are unlikely to report their experience to the police or in surveys using broad questions and labels. Because the real rape stereotype completely excludes male victims, men are even less likely than women to acknowledge an unwanted sexual experience as sexual assault, which suggests that male victimization rates may be even more affected by underreporting. A second reason for not reporting a sexual assault related to the real rape stereotype is that victims of non-stereotypical assaults are aware that others may subscribe to the stereotype and therefore expect that they will not be believed or treated negatively by professionals in the criminal justice system. Several studies show that this fear may not be unfounded, as police officers, prosecutors, and judges may also be influenced by misconceptions and stereotypes about rape. In a study with police officers in Germany, participants were asked to identify the prototypical features that characterized different rape categories, such as a typical rape, a dubious rape, or a false complaint. When describing a typical rape, they selected features such as a young victim, attacked outside by a stranger who was psychologically disturbed, with severe psychological consequences. The typical features assigned to a dubious and a false rape complaint were very different. In this category, the complainant was assumed to be an older woman above the age of 40 who was heavily drunk at the time of the alleged assault, claiming to have been assaulted by a friend or acquaintance in his or her own home and made no attempt to resist. A later study conducted interviews with experienced police officers in England, from which 3 distinct victim prototypes were extracted. The real victim, who is intelligent, well-dressed, upset, vulnerable, and wants to go to court. The mad victim, who has mental health issues and comes across as vague and irrational. And C, the bad victim, that is perceived as overtly sexual, cold, and unemotional. Further evidence shows that rape complaints that meet the definition of the real rape stereotype are more likely to progress through the criminal justice system and end in a conviction of the perpetrator, which further corroborates public opinion of what characterizes a genuine rape complaint. Taken together, the data presented in this section make it abundantly clear that the experience of sexual aggression is a reality in the lives of many women and also, though much less researched, in the lives of men. The available evidence shows that sexual assault is a gendered form of aggression, with more women than men experiencing victimization and the vast majority of perpetrators being male. However, see the discussion on female perpetrators later in this chapter. Therefore, understanding the causes of sexual aggression is a critical task for many disciplines, not least to provide directions for the development of policies and prevention strategies. See Chapter 12. Explaining sexual aggression. To understand sexual aggression as a social problem, an explanatory framework is required that considers risk factors at different levels, ranging from the societal level to the individual perpetrator. An overview of variables that affect the likelihood of men's sexual aggression is presented in Table 9.1, based on a comprehensive review of the literature in the World Report on Violence and Health, Krug et al., 2002. Table 9.1, Risk Factors for Male Sexual Aggression, Societal Factors, Social Norms Condoning Sexual Violence, Social Norms Supportive of Male Superiority and Sexual Entitlement, Weak Laws and Policies Against Sexual Violence, Weak Laws and Policies Related to Gender Equality, High Levels of Violent Crime, Community Factors, Poverty mediated through crisis of male identity, lack of employment opportunities, lack of institutional support from police and justice system, tolerance of sexual violence in the community, weak community sanctions against perpetrators of sexual violence, relationship factors, association with sexually aggressive peers, violent family environment, patriarchal family structures, emotionally unsupportive family environment, strong emphasis on family honor, individual factors, alcohol and drug use, coercive sexual fantasies, rape-supportive attitudes and beliefs, impulsive and antisocial tendencies, preference for impersonal sex, hostility towards women, history of child sexual abuse, witnessing family violence, societal factors such as policies related to gender equality or criminal justice responses to sexual assault, and community factors that lower the threshold for sexual violence need to be considered as a context in which relationship characteristics and individual differences come to bear. Therefore, a multi-level perspective considering these different factors is required to provide an explanation for sexual aggression. Rather than discussing all of the factors listed in Table 9.1, this section provides a summary of the current state of knowledge about the major factors associated with an increased likelihood of sexual aggression. For the purposes of this review, explanations of sexual aggression will be divided into two groups. The first group will be called macro-level explanations because they locate the causes of sexual aggression in general aspects of societal functioning or in evolutionary development. The second group will be called micro-level explanations because they focus on the individual perpetrator's interpersonal relationships, biographical experiences, and cognitive as well as affective processes as risk factors for sexually aggressive behavior. Macro-level explanations. In this section, two models of sexual aggression will be discussed which propose very different processes leading to sexual aggression: the sociobiological approach and the sociocultural approach. The sociobiological approach suggests a biological explanation of sexual aggression by placing modern-day sexual aggression within the evolutionary history of the human species. By contrast, the sociocultural approach highlights societal features as creating the breeding ground for sexual aggression and allowing it to persist. What the two approaches have in common is their emphasis on general mechanisms at the level of species and societies that promote sexual aggression. The sociobiological approach. At the core of the sociobiological approach, also known as the evolutionary approach, is the assumption that rape is a product of differences in men's and women's evolved sexuality. The general rationale of the sociobiological explanation of human aggression was outlined in Chapter 2. It refers to the function that a particular behavior has for the survival of members of a species and/or for the species as a whole. With regard to sexual aggression, the argument is that for some men, and under certain circumstances, rape may be an adaptive strategy that enhances the genetic fitness of the aggressor by increasing his chances of passing on his genes to future generations. A less prominent variant of the sociobiological approach is the idea that sexual aggression has evolved as a byproduct of a strong male sex drive, rather than being an adaptive mechanism in its own right for enhancing reproductive fitness. Travis, 2003b. The mainstream sociobiological argument holds that rape is a facultative mating strategy that is part of the behavior potential of all men. According to this view, rape is an option in the reproductive behavior by which men can circumvent obstacles in gaining access to females with high mating value, indicated by youth and physical attractiveness. However, it represents a high-cost mating strategy because most societies impose sanctions on rape, such as prison sentences and social stigma, which ultimately restrict a man's reproductive opportunities even further. Moreover, the chances of conception from a single sexual act under force are lower than from repeated sexual contacts with a consenting partner. Therefore, sexual aggression will be used only if less risky options are not available. In line with this reasoning, evidence is quoted that rape is more prevalent among men who are at a reproductive disadvantage due to low status, lack of financial resources, or lack of physical attractiveness, which make them undesirable mating partners. To support the sociobiological model of rape, two main data sources are used. A. Findings from animal studies providing observational data on forced copulation in various species, e.g. orangutans, as reviewed by McGivern et al. 2008, and B. Statistical reports on the prevalence of rape perpetration and victimization in different demographic groups. For example, the overrepresentation of women of reproductive age among victims and of low-status men among perpetrators is quoted in support of the sociobiological model. However, limitations have been noted for both data sources in terms of explaining human sexual aggression. As noted by Harding, 1985, the operational definition of what constitutes rape in animal behavior is inconsistent across studies. In addition, the very use of the term rape, which implies constructs such as without consent or against the female's will, to describe animal behavior is problematic. With regard to rape in humans, relying on statistical information about rape prevalence is also problematic because, as shown above, these sources represent a distorted picture of the true prevalence of sexual aggression. For example, the fact that low-status men and ethnic minority men feature more prominently in official statistics on sexual violence than high-status or majority group members of society may reflect the operation of social class stereotyping and ethnic bias. Moreover, the sociobiological explanation is confined to sexual violence against women of reproductive age and therefore cannot easily account for several manifestations of sexual aggression: sexual assault on children, on postmenopausal women, on men, and on individuals who are genetically related to the assailant. None of these forms of sexual aggression are functional in enhancing the reproductive fitness of the aggressor, and therefore, they fall outside the scope of the sociobiological explanation of rape. The sociocultural approach. According to this approach, the roots of sexual aggression are to be found in the fabric of society, most notably in the social construction of gender relationships. This perspective has been advanced in particular by feminist authors who have argued that the power differential between men and women in many societies fosters the emergence of sexual aggression. By virtue of their greater social, material, and social power, men claim the right to seek sexual satisfaction regardless of the woman's wishes. Moreover, sexual aggression is instrumental in safeguarding and perpetuating male dominance by instilling a sense of fear and vulnerability in women. Sociocultural approach. Explanation of aggressive behavior as shaped by societal and cultural norms and practices. Support for the proposition that sexual aggression is the product of power differentials between men and women that may vary between societies comes from cross-cultural research comparing Western societies with societies in which sexual aggression is far less frequent or even non-existent. For example, Sanday, 1981, conducted an ethnographic study of 95 tribal societies, about half of which, 47%, she identified as rape-free, i.e. showing no or only a minimal prevalence of sexual aggression. In contrast, 18% of societies were classified as rape-prone, with a high prevalence of sexual aggression. In the remaining societies, there were reports of rape, but no frequency information was available. In the rape-prone societies, sexual aggression served a ceremonial function, e.g. as a rite of passage for adolescent males, and or functioned as a means of domination and punishment of women. Rape-free societies were found to have low levels of aggression overall, and to place a high value on the contribution of women to the reproduction and continuity of the society. Studies linking variations in rape rates within the U.S. to women's social status, defined in terms of economic, educational, employment, and occupational indicators, yielded inconsistent findings. Whereas some studies found higher rape rates the lower the status of women compared with men, others found higher rates when women had a higher status, and yet others found no link at all. In their own analysis, which included 238 cities in the USA, Martin et al. 2006, found that the rates of police-recorded rapes were lower the higher the status of women.